Chapter 101, Nick Fury's change of plan. However, in recent years, this guy seemed to be a little tired of the game of conquest. Therefore, he gathered most of the forces and began to lurk in the dark. To not be completely separated from the outside world, he supported a group of peripheral organizations around the world. The Ten Rings gang in China belonged to this kind of situation. All right. Go and bring that kid back. Wenwu raised his hand and directly ordered. Yes, I will arrange it immediately. The servant cupped his fists. Then he stood up and immediately went to execute it. Wenwu placed his hands behind his back and turned around. He looked at the lush bamboo forest. Ying Li. Trust me. Very soon, I will bring you back from Ta Lo. His eyes were full of deep love. The wind blew the bamboo leaves. It was as if he was responding to his expectations. Except for the Ten Ring clan. The other organizations also started to operate and investigate. They wanted to see how Tony had invented this set of armor. Among all of them, S.H.I.E.L.D. was naturally one of them. Nick Fury, ever since he received this news, he immediately sent people to gather all the information about Tony during this period. In fact, he had paid attention to Tony a long time ago. Because his father, Howard Stark, was also one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. As a top scientist and partner of S.H.I.E.L.D., Howard had studied a lot of high-tech equipment for S.H.I.E.L.D. But unfortunately, in the 80s, he encountered a car accident and unfortunately died. After Howard Stark died, Nick Fury had once sent out a special agent. At that time, Tony, who was still very young, had secretly given him a certain degree of protection. But later on, he found that his protection was completely unnecessary. After losing his father, Tony quickly became mature. Then, using his genius mind, he led Stark Industry onto the right path. He even became stronger. Nick Fury was relieved. He gradually stopped paying attention to him. Unexpectedly. This time, he had caused such a big commotion. He had even cleared out the Ten Ring gang's stronghold. As expected of Howard Stark's son. Chief. Information about Tony Stark has been sent to your channel. At this time, Nick Fury's assistant, Hill, dressed in black, walked in. He reported to Nick Fury. Okay. Nick Fury opened the transparent screen in front of him. Then he slipped. The next second, all the images and information about Tony have been recorded on it. Nick Fury Jin quickly browsed through it. He tried to find out the reason why Tony made the armor. However, after reading it, his expression was a little strange. What is it, Director? Is there anything wrong? Hill asked. Before this, she had already checked the information. She did not find anything unusual. Why do I feel like Tony's armor? It's a bit similar to Hiden Intelligence's Humagear. Nick Fury immediately pulled out a picture of Humagear. Moreover, it was matched with Iron Man's armor. Found it. There were several similarities. As an agent, his sensitivity was different from that of ordinary people. With a single glance, he could tell the source of inspiration for the Tony battle armor. Looks like Humagear must have stimulated Tony. They are the inspiration of the battle armor. Nick Fury stroked his chin and deduced. It is indeed a possibility. Agent Hill added from the side. Speak. Does Hiden Intelligence also have this technology? Nick Fury turned around and asked Hill. I don't think so. Hill shook his head when he heard this. No matter what. A high-tech weapon like this must not be handed to society. Help me connect to Natasha. Nick Fury placed his hands on his waist and paced back and forth in the office. Soon, Black Widow's face appeared on his screen. How is the mission completed? Nick Fury asked immediately. Natasha could not help but let out a bitter smile. She seemed to be very frustrated. It turned out that she had been trying to get in touch with the other party these days. But she didn't expect that she didn't even see a single strand of hair of them in the end. She went to Hiden Intelligence headquarters and was told Levi was not there. She went to his private manor, but she was not allowed to enter at all. Hearing Natasha's report, Nick Fury pondered for a moment. It seems that Levi doesn't like your style. Since that's the case, then you should change the mission for the time being. Let's go to Stark Industry first. Let's see if we can get hold of Tony's battle armor blueprint. Nick Fury immediately pointed it out. Natasha, who was facing each other, also let out a sigh of relief. Getting rid of Tony Stark was much easier than getting rid of Levi. Understood, Director. After discussing the details with Nick Fury, Black Widow quickly went offline. Then, Director, should we give up on the original plan against Hiden Intelligence for now? Hill asked as she recorded. Hiden's mission still needs to be carried out, Nick Fury said in a deep voice with his hands behind his back. He always felt that this Hiden was definitely not as simple as he seemed on the surface. Then who should we send to this mission? Hill continued to ask. Chapter 102, Collecting World Points Passively. Nick Fury turned his head around. He turned his gaze to Hill. It was an insincere smile. Me? Hill pointed at himself with a face of disbelief. Apart from that, in another side of S.H.I.E.L.D., Pierce was not idle either. They also began to investigate Tony. Regarding the armor, they also coveted it. Contact Obadiah. Let's see if he can steal the core secrets of the armor. Pierce turned around and said to his subordinates. This Obadiah was also a member of Hydra. Back then, this Howard had a good reputation. They arranged for Obadiah to sneak into Stark Industry as a spy. However, for so many years, they didn't contact this guy much either. This guy was really doing well. He became the second largest shareholder of Stark Industry. Now, it was time to use him again. Right. Why haven't we heard any news about Dr. Zola recently? Pierce asked his subordinates. I don't know. According to what he said, he should be studying something. The subordinate immediately replied. Tell him to be safe. This Nick Fury is about to build an air carrier. Pierce said in a low voice. When the time comes, the inside plan he planned still needed the help of Dr. Zola. Only, he did not know. At this moment, Dr. Zola was in full swing undergoing the transformation into a cyborg. Moreover, in his heart, he had already come up with a plan to leave Hydra and create his own faction. On the other side, Levi leisurely took care of the flowers and plants in his garden. In this garden, he was planting precious flowers and plants that he had brought from all over the world. It was extremely beautiful. Levi carried a watering can and shuttled through it. From time to time, he watered a few beautiful flowers. Then, he raised the scissors in his other hand and cut off the extra branches. He was busy for quite a while. Only then did he walk to the resting area in the middle of the pavilion and sit down. As for Aguilera, she was wearing a maid outfit. She helped him prepare the afternoon tea. As for Izu, she was also standing at the side. On the television beside him, Tony's press conference was being broadcasted. Hiden Intelligence. Come chase me to your heart's content. Our Stark Enterprise is the real no one. Listening to Tony's coquettish speech, Izu was so angry that his face was pouting. President. Should I send someone to teach this guy a lesson? Izu said indignantly. It was clear that this Kamen Rider technology was first produced by their company. But now, her reputation was snatched away by Tony. This made her very indignant. For the past few days, with the awakening of the singularity of technology, this Izu was becoming more and more adorable. No need. Since this Tony wants this reputation, we'll give it to him. Levi said with a smile. He raised his hand and picked up a cup of tea from the table. He took a sip. For him, fame was just a burden. Since this Tony wanted it, then he would give it to him. After all, the most important thing was the actual benefits. As the video of Tony and his armor spread, as expected, he once again obtained a large amount of world point. And at the same time, Hydra and Osborn, they were working together to develop Kamen Rider Universe's technology. This also caused his world point to rise bit by bit. Although there weren't many of them. However, it was still much faster than when he first developed Hiden Intelligence by himself. Everyone picked up their own baton. Levi had a deep understanding of this point. If, in the future, there would be some Kamen Rider Universe technology popping around, he wanted to take a look first. The things in this world were suitable for him. If they were suitable, he would slowly develop them. He would amass power, expanding his own power. As for some of Kamen Rider Universe's legacy, he could spread them out. He could make those superheroes and villains into his workers. They would silently create world point for him. He would be able to hide behind the scenes and be carefree. Waiting for World Point to enter the account, wouldn't that be wonderful? And just as Levi was thinking like this, the system jumped out at the right time. Ding! Congratulations host, World Point has accumulated to 500,000. You can buy an incomplete world card once. Do you want to buy it? The so-called incomplete world card. It wasn't like the previous world's legacy card. That world's legacy card could obtain the abilities and knowledge of that Kamen Rider universe. And this incomplete world card could only extract one thing from the world. It was like opening a treasure chest. What could he obtain from it? It all depended on luck. Compared to the complete world legacy card, the value ratio was undoubtedly much smaller. Generally speaking, Levi would not care about such a proposal. But recently, he was in a better mood. And it was coming down. According to his plan, a grand performance was about to start. If he performed well, he would win a huge amount of world point. This time, it's a big win. Chapter 103, 2 Protagonist Rider. Purchase the incomplete world card. Ding! Purchase successful. Let me take a look. Which world did you get this time, Legacy? Levi opened the system and took out the incomplete world card. He saw the front of the card. 2 figures, one on the left and one on the right. He was violently attacking the demon soldiers next to him. 2 main characters. Seeing these 2 figures, Levi couldn't help but smile. In fact, among Kamen Riders, one who had double main character was rare. Among them, the most famous one was, without a doubt, it was Kamen Rider W, Double. The one he drew was actually it. Shotaro and Philip, Joker and Cyclone. The 2 of them combined and complemented each other. It could be said to be a perfect match. But unfortunately, this time, what he drew was not Kamen Rider W. The card tilted slightly, and the light shone. The actual appearances of the 2 riders were revealed. One of them was wearing pink-blue armor and was in an attacking posture. It had an exaggerated red compound eye. In addition, it had a mouth full of sharp teeth and ape teeth. If one didn't look closely, they would think that it was the villain rider. The other person was dressed in black, his face full of a funny expression. Behind him, there was also a long tail. It was moving backward. It looked very funny. These 2 people were the characters in Kamen Rider's latest work. No wonder it's an incomplete world. When Levi saw the true face of the card, he could not help but smile again. In fact, before he transmigrated, this Kamen Rider had just started broadcasting. How could there be a complete legacy? But speaking of which, the setting of this Kamen Rider was very interesting. It was different from 01's technology and magic. The keyword for Kamen Rider was love and devil. The plot was also very interesting. 50 years ago, the archaeology team found a strange seal in a super ancient ruin. An archaeologist did not care. He pressed the seal, but who knew that he actually summoned a terrifying devil? The archaeology team was also wiped out because of this. 50 years later, a demon worship organization, the Dead Man, appeared. For the former demon king, Lord Gif. They used the demon seal to cause trouble everywhere. It would materialize the hidden demons in the human body and cause damage to society. It would create conditions for the release of the Devil King. And in order to deal with this villain organization, the government had established Phoenix to deal with it. It had to be said. This Phoenix was extremely similar to S.H.I.E.L.D. The same special agent setting. The same main base, Sky Shuttle mothership. Even if there were a mole in the base, it would be the same. To deal with the dead man, using the Devil Seal, Phoenix designed Rider's Vice system. Originally, this Rider system was meant to be given to the organization's agents. But unexpectedly, this sophomore was afraid of the Devil's power, so the transformation did not succeed. Coincidentally, at this time, the dead man attacked. To protect the family members present, the older brother of the second year, Iki Igarashi, stepped forward bravely. He signed a contract with Demon Vice, residing in his body. He successfully transformed into Kamen Rider Revis. He started a battle with the enemy. This was the beginning of the story. Back then, Levi liked this drama a lot. It was a pity that he hadn't even watched a few episodes before coming to this Marvel world. Although it was a little regretful. However, he had a deep impression of the female villain in this drama, Aguilera. Therefore, when he was selecting maids, He had specially found a person that looked extremely similar to hers. It had to be said. This Aguilera was still quite seductive. As expected of an existence that attracted thousands of riders to change sides. As he thought about this, he looked at the maid, who was half kneeling and pouring tea. As for Aguilera, he saw Levi looking at him. She immediately blushed a little. Then, let me take a look next. What can this Kamen Rider bring me? As he spoke, he crushed the card in his hand. The card immediately exploded. Then, it turned into a ray of light. But this time, this light did not enter his mind. Instead, it gathered on the table and finally formed a silver box. On it were the words Phoenix. It looked like. This was the thing he had drawn this time. Levi crossed his legs and sat on a chair under the garden. Looking at the small silver box in front of him, he couldn't help but smile. Aguilera, open this box for me. On the side, Aguilera. Obviously, she did not see such a scene. After being stunned for a moment, she heard Levi's instructions. She seemed to wake up from a dream and raised her slender hand. With a crack, the box was opened. Then, she respectfully held it in front of Levi. Levi swept a glance over it. In the middle of the silver box was a red belt. The front of it was like an electronic watch. It was unusually exquisite. The surroundings were covered with red tubes that looked like muscle fibers. It looked ferocious and overbearing. The two of them combined. But there was no sense of disharmony at all. It's actually this. When Levi saw this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He was clearly a little surprised. Because of the thing in front of him. Chapter 104, A Little Push for a Bright Future. It was not the Rivas drive owned by the protagonist Ikki. It's not the Tusai drive either. Instead, it was the demon's driver. Although driver was not as good as the two driver above him. It was full of surprise. But when it appeared, it was also extremely stunning. Other than this belt. In the box, there were 4 demon seals. They represented 4 different kinds of animals. Those who could help to transform into riders with different abilities. Looks like. This system really understands my thoughts. The corners of Levi's mouth curled into a smile. Then, he raised his hand and asked Lala to close the box. This way. My dance stage. We'll have another new member. He raised the afternoon tea on the table. He took a light sip. His expression was happy and content. He was like a musician who was about to play. Yes. The main element of this Kamen Rider was the spider. Let me ask. Is there even a more suitable rider than Spider-Man? Right, Izu. How is Peter Parker these days? He turned around and asked Izu beside him. Reporting to the president. Peter Parker. He met Dr. Connors last time. So, I have been looking for an opportunity to meet him again. But I haven't been able to do so. Therefore, I have been wandering around the vicinity of Dr. Connors' residence recently. Izu checked the records. Soon, he told him about Peter Parker's recent schedule. At this time, Parker. It was still the same as before. He had not yet become the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Oh. It looks like. Our Spider-Man is growing a little slowly. Levi said jokingly after hearing this. Yes. At this time, Peter Parker had not become Spider-Man. Because these days, he had been rushing about to find out about his father's death. Originally, Dr. Connors was a good breakthrough point. But for some reason, he suddenly disappeared. He went to Osborne Industries to ask, but the staff did not know anything. He went to Dr. Connors' residence. The door was tightly shut, and no one could be seen. The investigation was in a deadlock, which made Parker very depressed. Naturally, there he has no extra power to be a superhero. In that case, then help him. Levi raised his hand and placed the teacup on the table. As he spoke, he called Izu and Aguilera over. Then, he told them his plan. Hearing Izu and Aguilera, he nodded repeatedly. How is it? Understood. After Levi finished speaking, he glanced at the two of them. Understood, my president. Understood, master. The two of them blinked their cute eyes and nodded together. Very good. I've already prepared the stage. Then, let's start the first scene. Levi raised his hand and said with a smile. His hand was hanging upside down. It was as if he was carrying countless puppets. He couldn't help but shudder. And at this time, in Osborne Industries' underground laboratory, many scientists had been fighting for 2 weeks. The continuous experiments exhausted them. The experimental body let out a miserable scream. It also made their minds close to collapse. After all, the tragic state of some experimental subjects was truly unbearable to look at. It was just a glance. It is very demoralizing. Every scientist. At this moment, they all had black eyes, like walking corpses. Even Dr. Connors, who was mainly in charge of the experiments, could not endure all of this. He immediately protested to Norman Osborn, wanting a day off to rest. This immediately made Norman Osborn furious. One had to know. They only had less than a week left before the military's inspection. These guys wanted to rest. However, although he was furious in his heart. However, Norman Osborn had been the CEO for so many years. He still understood that there would be no good end for him if he dried up the pond to fish. These scientists had already tensed up to the extreme. It was obviously not a solution to continue squeezing them like this. Thus, Norman Osborn had no choice but to compromise. They had approved their vacation for half a day. Of course, there were conditions. They were not allowed to leave Osborne Building. They could only go to a special floor to rest. Every move would be guarded by special security personnel, to prevent them from leaking the secret of this experimental machine in advance. And in the face of such a request from Norman Osborn, Dr. Connors looked at his colleagues behind him and had no choice but to compromise. Therefore, everyone walked out of the underground laboratory. They were relaxing. For a moment, the entire underground laboratory became empty. Only a small number of staff were left, still carrying out some data processing work. But it seems something wrong is happening here. Chapter 105, Realization of a Cleaning Service. Osborn was not idle either. He picked up the phone and asked the other group of people to take this rare opportunity to hurry over. Not long after, the door on the other side of the underground laboratory opened. A group of cleaning staff dressed in sterilized clothing walked in. They held various cleaning tools and walked in. Osborne's biological laboratory had a very high standard of sanitary. So, it needed to be cleaned often. Therefore, Osborne Industries cooperated with the cleaning company. He specially hired a group of people to clean the upper-level laboratories regularly. As for the black guy, Pike, he was one of them. He had just been released from prison. He was penniless. Coincidentally, he saw the cleaning company recruiting. Therefore, he joined in. Who knew that he had only been in the office for a few days? He was packed up by the company and sent to Osborne to act as a specialized laboratory cleaning staff. Initially, he was only responsible for cleaning the laboratories on the upper levels. For glassware, white mice, and so on, he needs to clean them up. Who knew how many days ago? This Osborne company suddenly issued a task. It required 10 people to go to a certain place to clean. The reward is very high. If you work for a day, you can get $1,000 in reward. Of course, there are also requirements. First, you can't tell anyone what you see in the laboratory. Second, after the cleaning is done, it needs to be isolated for 2 weeks. The official statement is to block the virus. Anyone who violates any of the rules will be fined. The other cleaners all expressed their refusal. After all, they still had family members. They could not endure the 2 weeks of isolation. However, Parker actively reported his name. After all, 1 day of work could earn him $1,000. With such a high income, he, who was low in the pocket, was moved. And after the event, he could also live for 2 weeks with good food and drink. Where could he find such a good thing? As a result, he took this job in glory. The 2 of you will be in charge of Area A1. The 2 of you will be in charge of Area B2. Very quickly, Pike's memories were broken by the arrangements of the staff. He hurriedly bowed. Then, he picked up the cleaning tools. Then, under the guidance of the staff, they headed towards the B2 region. It had to be said. This underground laboratory was much more mysterious than the one on the surface. Every place had a safety glass door. If they wanted to enter, they had to enter the password. The guards were also very strict. This B2 region was at the southeast corner of the underground laboratory. They took several turns before finally entering. Pike looked around. He discovered that this place seemed to be a place that specialized in imprisoning something. Listen up. All you need to do is clean up the filth in the room. You don't need to care about anything else. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences. After the staff member finished speaking, he did not wait for them to reply and hurriedly left. The security door was closed again. Is there a need to be in such a hurry? Pike shook his head and picked up the cleaning tools on the small cart. He began to clean up this place. Inside, there seemed to be small laboratories that were separated. Or rather, it was the observation room. He couldn't remember its name anyway. Some laboratories were directly opened. And some were still in a closed state. He directly entered one of the rooms. Inside was a large pool of black and red stuff. And some vomit. It looked disgusting. It also emitted an unpleasant stench. Oh, my God! He had to pinch his nose. He endured nausea and swept the filth into the garbage bag. Then, he used a mop to dry it. Then, he brought the packed garbage bags and headed to the next laboratory. However, the following laboratory looked even more horrifying than the previous one. The glass wall was covered in black blood. On the ground, there were also many unknown pieces of flesh. These guys, what exactly did they do here? Pike could not help but question in his heart. Although it was disgusting, it was for the sake of the $1,000. He still picked up the rag and began to clean it up. Just as he was carefully cleaning it up, suddenly, a terrifying pounding sound came from the side. Rumble. The entire reinforced glass wall shook. This loud sound. Pike couldn't help but jump in fright. He hurriedly took a few steps back. But soon, the sound stopped. Pike carefully cleaned up the remaining filth. He immediately packed up his things. Pushing the cart, he prepared to leave this area. However, at this moment, the laboratory door on the opposite side shook violently. Immediately after, a ferocious face was pressed against the glass window at the laboratory entrance. "Let me out! Let me out!" Roar. Pike's body trembled, but he subconsciously looked over. When he saw this, he was instantly stunned. "Gil, why are you here?" Pike had an expression of disbelief on his face. This Gil was his former roommate in prison. However, this guy was sentenced to life imprisonment. He should stay in prison for the rest of his life. How is this possible? Obviously. Gil recognized Pike as well. His pupils dilated. A strange expression appeared on his face. Chapter 106, Shadow Behind the Glass Prison. The scary expression only appeared for a split second, then instantly disappeared. "Pike, quickly, quickly release me. Please, quickly, quickly let me out." This guy, while slapping the door, pleaded to Pike. Pike was no longer afraid of this former friend of his. He immediately put down the cleaning work and moved closer. "Oh, Gil. Why are you here? Speaking of which, how do I open this door?" Pike immediately crouched at the laboratory entrance and began to study it. After a while, he found out. There was an invisible electronic password lock on the side. Pike randomly pressed a few buttons. The electronic password lock immediately made a sound of error. However, Gil noticed the situation on the outside as well. He immediately tells him the password. This was the skill they had learned when they were in jail. It was a skill they had learned. Pike did not suspect anything. He immediately followed his instructions and entered the password. Password entered correctly. Observation cabin door open. Only a piercing sound was heard. Steam erupted from the mouth of the door. The door of the experimental pod immediately opened. Pike wanted to say a few words of greeting to Gil, who was inside, but suddenly was stopped. Suddenly, a black shadow pounced out from within the glass prison. He threw Pike to the ground. "Fuck! You bastard!" Pike wanted to say something. He saw a bloody mouth biting towards him. In less than a second, fresh blood flowed out in all directions. "Hey! Pike, are you done cleaning up?" Another cleaner had already finished cleaning his area. At this moment, he was leisurely walking out with a bucket in his hand. Who knew? Once out of the corridor, he saw a dark figure lying on the ground, biting something. Oh my God! Seeing this, the bucket in his hand fell to the ground. And hearing the sound of movement, the pitch-black shadow suddenly turned around. Two scarlet eyes, breathtaking and terrifying. He was like a demon that had crawled out from within the earth. The blood at the corner of his mouth was mixed with saliva as he kept falling down. This made him look even more terrifying. Seeing this scene, this cleaner was immediately scared out of his wits. He fled outside in a panic. "Murder! Murder!" he shouted in panic. However, the security door blocked his way. "Quick, open the door!" His legs trembled in panic. Unfortunately, no one responded to his request. The cleaner could only quickly raise his trembling hands. He entered the password on the safety door screen. Beep. 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 Several times later. Not only did the security door not open, but it was also sealed. On the contrary, it was due to the multiple mistakes in the password. It directly triggered the safety alarm. Woo! The alarm above immediately sounded. The entire corridor turned dark red. This made this place look even more terrifying. It was like hell. Warning, you have entered the password incorrectly 4 times. There is one more chance. Otherwise, the door will be closed for 1 hour. The cleaner was so nervous that he was sweating. He kept swallowing his saliva. However, he still did not give up. One more time, it will definitely be successful. I remember the password. He wiped the sweat off his face and tried hard to recall. The staff member's fingers moved. Then he raised his trembling hand. Enter the last password. However, right at this moment, a black shadow had already silently arrived behind him. Ding! Congratulations, the password has been entered correctly. Success! The cleaner was overjoyed. He was just about to push open the security door in front of him. However, he suddenly saw the reflection on the door. What? The cleaner's face was full of horror. He wanted to turn back. However, at this moment, shua! A pitch-black claw pierced through his chest. The cleaner lowered his head in disbelief. He looked at the black claw that appeared in front of his chest. It's really delicious. Just at this moment, behind him, a slightly morbid voice sounded. Immediately after, that claw suddenly retracted. With a poof. Immediately after, blood gushed out from the hole. The cleaner widened his eyes and fell to the ground powerlessly. And the experimental body? He looked excitedly at the heart in his claws. His eyes were full of appetite. The next second, he opened his bloody mouth and bit it. This scene. It was similar to the scene of Uncle Ren eating blackfish, and winter noodles. It could be said to be extremely bloody and cruel. In less than a second, this heart was eaten clean by him. This experimental body licked its tongue in satisfaction. A satisfied expression appeared on its face. Chapter 107, For the Greater Good of Human Evolution. Hearing the alarm, the surrounding security guards stand up from their posts and get ready. They brought their batons and pistols to check. When they saw the scene, they were shocked by the scene in front of them. As for the experimental subject, while they were in a daze, it rushed forward. One of the security guards raised the electric baton in his hand and wanted to attack it. However, he was sent flying by this guy's brute force. Bang! He crashed into the wall and instantly fainted. When the other two saw this, they both raised their pistols from their waists. They aimed at the experimental subject and prepared to fire. However, the reaction speed of the experimental subject far surpassed that of the two. It took the opportunity to dodge. Then, it raised his mutated claws. He grabbed the guard's arms. He pulled with all his might. There was a piercing sound. The guard was instantly torn apart. Blood rained down. This experimental body was bathed in blood. It was abnormally sinister. The other guard fell to the ground in fright. However, he didn't know if it was because it was full. The experimental subject didn't attack again. Instead, he glanced at that fellow before quickly leaving the scene. Very quickly, he found the weak point of the underground laboratory. With a single kick, he shattered the door. Immediately after, he disappeared into the dark ring. Very quickly, the news of the experimental subject escaping had reached Osborne's ears. The current him. He had already returned to the chairman's office and was resting for a moment. However, he was still in his office chair, sleeping for a long time. He heard a subordinate report. He was immediately furious. You bunch of good-for-nothings, you actually let the experimental subjects go. What the hell are you doing? Norman Osborn roared. Did they even know the importance of this experiment? To let an experimental subject run away at such a critical juncture. Mr. Norman. It's not that we can't keep an eye on it, but that experimental subject is too terrifying. The security chief said, trembling with fear. Half of it was his fear of Norman Osborn. The other half was his fear of the experimental subject. Terrifying, how terrifying. However, at this time, Norman Osborn suddenly stopped his anger. He turned around and asked about the situation of the experimental subject. There is a video recording in the control room of our underground laboratory. If you are interested, you can go and take a look. Let's go. Norman Osborn said nothing. He picked up his suit and walked towards the underground laboratory. Also, inform those guys to cancel their vacation. Tell them to go with me. Not long later. This group of people had already gathered in the surveillance room. The big screen in front of them showed the situation of the experimental body. All of it was broadcasted. When those scientists saw such a bloody and cruel sight, their expressions all changed. Some people even spat it out. This Amazon cell has a flaw. That's right. I discovered it had an unusual desire for protein. I didn't expect it to work on a human body in such a situation. Wow. Blurg. Dr. Connors, who was mainly in charge of the experiments, also frowned. He could not bear to look straight at the scene in front of him. His eyes were filled with regret. He had actually inadvertently created such a monster. However, Norman Osborn was different from everyone else. He placed his hands on his hips as he looked at the experimental subjects on the screen, slaughtering them all. His eyes were filled with excitement. That's right. This is it, Amazon cell. This guy's physical fitness has increased by at least 10 times. Norman Osborn's voice trembled a little. His plan to strengthen his body seemed to be about to succeed. However, there were also some minor side effects. Mr. Norman. This experiment cannot continue. Dr. Connors solemnly looked at Norman Osborn and said. Stop. Are you kidding me? Norman Osborn grabbed Dr. Connors by the collar and said coldly. The experiment has already been carried out to this point. We must not give up halfway. Immediately after, he let go of Dr. Connors. Then, he looked at the scientists beside him. Everyone, this Amazon cell can indeed strengthen the human body. Although there are still some minor side effects right now. But as long as we can overcome them, we can help humans evolve to another height. Norman Osborn's voice gradually became louder. Everyone. You guys have been working hard for so long. Are you willing to give up now? Right now, we just need to develop another type of medicine. Restrain their desire for protein. Isn't that enough? Norman Osborn said passionately. His speech had indeed infected some scientists. The desire to create life had already surpassed human nature in their hearts. They gradually stood behind Norman Osborn. A small number of people still refused to continue the experiment. Among them, Dr. Connors was the leader. However, at this time, Norman Osborn tore off his hypocritical mask. Very good. Since you are unwilling, then I won't force you. Norman Osborn said coldly. Instantly, the security guards around them all raised their guns. They aimed at the resisting scientists. Chapter 108, Secretary Showdown Izu vs Azu. You guys resigned just in time. The laboratory is still lacking a batch of experimental materials. I'll leave it to you guys to fill these vacancies. With a ruthless tone but a calm face, Norman Osborn said coldly. After all, now, he had confirmed that Amazon cell could indeed strengthen the body. He no longer needed so many guys. As long as he could develop something that could suppress protein craving, his experiment would be considered a success. He would also be able to make the military invest in him. Right. Next, besides researching protein inhibitors, these two things should also be forged together. As he spoke, Norman Osborn raised his hand. He threw down 2 blueprints. On it was 2 belts of different colors. This was the inspiration he had felt when he saw Tony's news. This belt. It could stimulate the activity of the Amazon cell. When the goal of strengthening was achieved, showing it to the military would definitely achieve good results. And on the other side, Izu followed Levi's instructions and headed to Hiden building. Then, he took the elevator and went to the 6th floor. The door opened. The dark underground suddenly became bright and clear. Satellite Arc. Sir President, have me come and take a piece of Projirisekis. By the way, check the production progress of the Golden Thousand Ridet. Izu walked in front of Satellite Arc. He asked directly. Humph. If the President needs it, I can personally report it to him. Why did he send you here to ask? However, at this moment, in the dark, a graceful figure walked out. It was the red-haired Azu. At this moment, her outfit changed again. She was no longer dressed in her usual leather clothes. Instead, she had changed into a black muslin dress. She looked like a bride waiting to be married, even more beautiful than before. She looked at Izu provocatively. Izu looked at her dress. She couldn't help but look down at herself. Her cute eyes narrowed. Obviously, she felt a hint of threat. Due to the awakening of the singularity technique, it made Izu more and more like an ordinary girl. It looked like, I should also apply for a request to the President. See if I can change into other clothes. Izu thought silently in his heart. Only a moment. She raised her head again. Her face was filled with a cute smile. You have to ask yourself. I don't know why the President allowed me to stay by his side. As for you, you can only stay in this dark corner. Izu said with a beaming smile. You. The red-haired Azu who was facing her heard this. She could not help but feel anxious. However, she rolled her eyes. She instantly thought of a way to respond. Humph. It's just your luck. It was created before me. If it was Ark who was created first, then the one staying here now is you. The red-haired Azu crossed her arms in front of her chest and said disdainfully. The meaning behind her words. It was just that Izu had taken advantage of her early birth. In terms of performance, Ark is also stronger than Zia. Otherwise, every time the President creates Projirisekis, we have not to pass through it. The red-haired Azu proudly declared. Is that so? On the other side, when Izu heard this, she immediately became somewhat dissatisfied. Their gazes met. It was like a spark hitting the earth. Lightning shot out. Since that's the case, let's compete then. Let's see the truth. The red-haired Azu immediately suggested. All right. As you wish. The little secretary, Izu, was no longer shy and reserved now. She immediately agreed. It was only an instant. The two of them left the internet space. Now, let me see. In the end, it is Satellite Arc who is stronger. It is still your satellite, Zia, who is more powerful. Azu's figure appeared. Behind her, countless black and red runes flew out. The network space behind her was also infected. It instantly turned into a black and red color. It was like a swamp. As for Izu, she was still standing there politely. Countless blue 0 and 1 characters appeared around her. The surrounding background. It was also dyed blue. This was the computing power that the satellite Zia had brought her. Immediately after, the two of them raised their heads at the same time. They were ready to launch an attack on the other side. Behind Izu, the President was troubled. High-tech discussion group. The icy blue 0 and 1 data was crazily surging. As for the red-haired Azu, she was not to be outdone. In the scarlet space, the malicious characters were like ants. They were densely packed toward the other side. Chapter 109, Aftermath of the Two-Sister Clash. The two computing powers collided quickly. For a moment, the entire network seemed to be affected. For example, in some office buildings around Hiden Building, the white-collar workers were sitting in front of the computer, writing the proposal. However, in the next second, some official work pages they had originally opened were suddenly inaccessible. In an instant, it turned into some indecent pages. The contents inside made people blush. As for the other members of the underground network, they were using videos to conduct underground transactions. Who knew that in the next second, the target of the transaction on the other side, the scene changed. It turned into a police connection. The two sides looked at each other in the video. It was so awkward. Just as the two sides were about to continue their confrontation, an illusory figure suddenly descended and appeared in this space. He was in the junction of scarlet and blue. He was dressed in white. His entire body was emitting light. It was illusory and real, just like a god. He raised his hand and tapped lightly. In a split second, the scarlet and ice blue characters instantly retreated. In less than a second, the entire network space turned into pure white. As for Aizu and the red-haired Azu, who were facing each other, when they saw him, they were shocked. They couldn't help but be slightly shocked. Then, they bowed to him. Because that figure was no one else. It was their president, Levi. They had the highest authority over Satellite Arkansas. "I'm sorry, President." Aizu looked a little flustered. That appearance. She was like a good child who had been discovered secretly doing bad things by her parents. She felt uneasy. As for the red-haired Azu, she couldn't help but stick out her tongue. A mischievous expression appeared on her face. "You guys!" Levi looked at the secretaries on both sides. He couldn't help but curse. Before, he originally wanted to make it convenient. Thus, he did not move and continued to stay in the manor. Instead, he had Aizu take his place and head to the 6th underground floor. She only needed to take out Projirisekis, which Ark had printed out. He didn't expect it will be like this. Something happened to those who were lazy. His two secretaries actually started fighting. In fact, before this, Aizu and the red-haired Azu were both in a state of the Cold War. What was the matter? It was Levi who personally went down to deal with it. Unexpectedly. Now that the two of them had met, it was as if Mars had crashed into the Earth. They directly started fighting. These two little secretaries really made him worry. Levi sighed. He first looked at the red-haired Azu. "President, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have had a conflict with Sister Aizu." Seeing that Levi was looking at her, that red-haired Azu immediately rushed up. She pulled Levi's sleeve and acted like a spoiled child. "Since you know this is wrong, why did you still attack?" Levi asked with a smile. "I'm still on the 6th underground floor. I've been here for too long. I'm a little jealous when I see Sister Aizu accompanying the president. That's why she provoked me." The red-haired Azu pouted and quickly apologized. "Aizu, what about you?" Levi turned around again and looked at Aizu, who was wearing a secretary's uniform. "I also know I was wrong." Aizu also lowered her head and walked to Levi's side. She said in a low voice. "All right. This time, I won't punish you. But next time, if I catch you again, I will never forgive both of you." Levi touched the cute little heads of the two secretaries and said helplessly. "Azu. Give Projirisekis to Aizu. Since you feel a little bored. Then wait a few days. I will also send you out to carry out a mission." Levi helplessly looked at the red-haired Azu at the side and said somewhat helplessly. This Azu had always been locked up on the 6th underground floor. It was a little stifling. Just in time. After all, he had a plan and needed Azu to make a trip. "Yay! Sir President, this is great!" Azu immediately cheered. She was like a child who had been given a lollipop. As she spoke, she even glanced at Aizu who was facing her. It was as if she was showing off. And when Levi saw this, he couldn't help but glance at the red-haired Azu. This red-haired Azu immediately retracted his head. She didn't dare to be so arrogant. "All right. Then that's it for now." Levi's illusory figure disappeared from the internet. As for Aizu and the red-haired Azu, they looked at each other. Then, they left the internet space and returned to the 6th underground level. Azu took out the piece of Projirisekis that had already been printed out. She handed it over to Aizu. "You have to take good care of it, Sister Aizu. Otherwise, your position might very well be mine in the future." The red-haired Azu raised her slender fingers as she circled her long hair. Then she said with a smile. Aizu took Projirisekis. Without saying anything else, she turned around and left. She was afraid that she could not stand this girl's provocation. Chapter 110, The Other Side of Peter Parker. "Have a good trip, Sister Aizu." Azu waved her hand. On the other side. In the school, the bell rang. Parker stood up, grabbed his bag, and rushed out. His good friend, Ned, saw this and couldn't help but chase after him. "Hey, Parker! What happened to you these past few days? Once school is over, you always run out in a hurry." Ned looked a little confused. He scratched his head and looked at Parker beside him. "You haven't been coming to our high-tech discussion club recently. We have been discussing this recently. This Hiden Intelligence and Stark Industry, who is the first technology company? Ned followed Parker as he continued to tell him. One must know. This was Parker's favorite topic in the past. Whenever it came to Hiden Intelligence, he always talked non-stop. But in the recent few days, Parker seemed to have some urgent matters to attend to. Hey, Ned. No matter what, this Hiden Intelligence will always be number one in my heart. But recently, I do have some matters to attend to. I'm sorry, brother. Parker patted Ned on the shoulder and slipped away like a wisp of smoke. He disappeared right in front of his eyes. Soon, he arrived in front of an iron railing in the school. This iron railing was 2 meters tall. Parker looked around. There was no one around. Thus, he jumped up. His body instantly soared into the air and immediately flipped over the railing. Then, he landed lightly on the ground. Ever since the last time he came back from Hiden Intelligence, he had never understood his body. Parker discovered that his physical fitness had a qualitative leap. Whether it was strength or reaction speed, they all become extremely powerful. Even in school, Flash Thompson, who was the best in sports, was easily crushed by him. Even in order to verify his own strength, he even deliberately concealed his identity. He brought the headgear and headed to an underground arena. As a result, even if he had no experience, he still won 3 victories. Because of this, he even got the title of Spider Boy. This was why. This was the reason why he kept running outside after school. But today, he had left school so early not to go to the underground boxing match. Instead, he was prepared to go to Dr. Connor's house again to see if he had returned. After all, only he could help him find out the truth about his father's death. Just like that, Parker carried his bag and listened to the song. He smoothly called a taxi. Because of the victory in the underground boxing match, he now had a small surplus. Naturally, he would not be as thrifty as before. However, Parker, who was somewhat pleased with himself, did not notice. Behind him was a slightly dilapidated old car. It was right behind him, following closely behind. In this old man's car, there was no one else. It was Parker's uncle, Ben. And there was a reason why he followed Parker. It turned out, for the past few days, Parker not only left early and returned late. Moreover, there were scratches and bloodstains on his clothes from time to time. This discovery caused the couple to be extremely worried. He was afraid that Parker was caught up in bad things. One had to know. In the United States, gangs ran rampant. If he couldn't protect him, Parker would go astray. However, when the two of them asked Peter, they couldn't get anything out of it. So today, this uncle specially took the time to see what this Parker did tonight. Just like this, the two of them arrived near Dr. Connor's house one after the other. This Dr. Connors was Osborne Industries' experimental supervisor. Naturally, the salary was indispensable. Therefore, the house was also very good. It was a 3-story villa. Parker got out of the car and came to the door. He raised his hand and was about to knock on the door. He heard a sound coming from inside. Oh! Could it be that Dr. Connors had already returned home? Parker's hand immediately stopped on the spot. Could it be? These past few days, Dr. Connors had been hiding from him. Was he deliberately not opening the door? Since that was the case, then he would secretly take a look at what this Dr. Connors was up to. Thinking of this, Parker suddenly became interested. He turned around and looked around. He found that there was no one around. So he took out the mask he wore when he was fighting in the underground ring from his backpack. He put it on his head. Then, he found a corner where no one was around. He raised his palm and covered the wall. Then, he was like a spider. He crawled upwards. You have to know. At this moment, Parker had yet to formulate his spider web. Yes. In the original work, Peter Parker's spider web was not produced from his body. Instead, it was made of high-tech chemical substances. However, he had mastered the rest of the things. Therefore, climbing the wall was not a problem. However, Parker was in high spirits. Unexpectedly, all of his actions had fallen into this uncle's eyes. Oh! Oh my God! At the corner of the street, this uncle sat in the car. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. His face was full of disbelief. Chapter 111, Uncle Ben's Disappointment. Uncle Ben was shocked. What he was shocked about was not that Parker knew how to climb a wall. Instead, he was shocked. This kid had become a thief. Yes. In this uncle's eyes. At this time, Parker was preparing to sneak into other people's houses and prepare to steal. This way. He usually left early and returned late, and he gradually became generous. It made sense. In a split second. This uncle seemed to have understood everything. His face was full of sadness. Then, trembling, he picked up his phone and called the police station. At this time, in Dr. Connor's residence, a black shadow was shuttling back and forth. From time to time, he would search for something. It was as if he was looking for something. No. No. Damn it, there isn't any here. The black shadow kept pulling the drawer. As he searched, he roared. On the ground. It was a mess, a horrible sight. There were traces of stuff being torn everywhere. And this black shadow was no one else. It was the guy who had escaped from the underground laboratory. After devouring 2 people, that fellow recovered from his hunger state. He regained his humanity. Previously, he was a prison prisoner, and his family had long been moved away. Thus, after he escaped, he wandered the streets. Moreover, after tasting flesh and blood for the first time, it was hard for him to suppress his desire for it. However, the remaining humanity in his heart was very resistant to it. It was a coincidence. He heard Dr. Connor's residence. He knew it when he was in the laboratory. This guy was the main person in charge of this experiment. So, he sneaked into his residence to take a look. Could there be a medicine that could remove his current state? Who knew? He searched the entire residence but did not find anything useful. This made him very angry. Moreover, due to excessive hunger, this caused his craving to grow even stronger. Damn it! Right now, I can't suppress the desire in my heart anymore. His hand tightly gripped the table. The veins on his neck bulged. And on his neck, there were black lines. It had already spread out. It was clear that he could not hold on for long. He was going to eat again. And at this moment, a strange noise came from the window. Ever since he was injected with Amazon Cell, this experimental subject's hearing had become incomparably sensitive. He suddenly turned his head. His scarlet eyes immediately saw the side of the window. Peter Parker, who wanted to look inside, came over. And just at this time, Peter Parker also heard the wailing in the room. He also looked inside. Their gazes met. In an instant, he was frightened to the point of being quick-witted. All the hairs on his body stood up. This was the spider sense, reminding him of the danger. Did this guy specially send it over for me to eat? The guy in the room sneered. He said with a fierce look in his eyes. Then, he could no longer suppress himself. It was as if he had gone mad. He shouted out an unknown word. However, his body emitted a strong white steam. Immediately after, along with the disappearance of the steam, a terrifying humanoid monster appeared in front of Parker in an instant. His limbs had mutated entirely. His 2 hands had turned pitch black. It was like the sharp claws of a wild beast. It shone with a cold light. The 2 legs also grew longer. They became incomparably thick. Bone spikes appeared on its surface. It even tore open its pants. Even its face became incomparably sinister. Like a cheetah. That's right. This fellow had already transformed into the form of a cheetah. In his mind, all that was left was the desire to eat. Roar. This guy let out a strange roar. Immediately, he suddenly stomped his foot. The terrifying force instantly created a huge pit in the ground. The next second, he was like an arrow leaving the bow, shooting out the window at Peter Parker. Peter Parker came back to his senses from his shock. Both his hands and feet exerted strength at the same time. He shot forward. He hurriedly kicked out. However, he did not know if he had used too much force. His body turned 180 degrees in the air. However, he still remained in his original position. And at this time, the cheetah had already broken through the window. With a bang, countless pieces of glass flew everywhere. They stopped in the air, reflecting the light of the street lamps. It was as gorgeous as bricks. And all of this, Parker could no longer see it. He could only see that a black figure had already rushed in front of him. 2 sharp claws. He hooked his shoulders and then pressed down heavily. Peter Parker wanted to struggle. However, there was no chance. There was a loud boom. The two of them slammed heavily onto the ground from the 3rd floor. Chapter 112, An Uncle's Duty. A huge crack hole appeared below, caused by the attack of the cheetah and the momentum of its descent. At this moment, all of them landed on Peter. His body could not help but tremble. All the organs in his body seemed to be displaced. His entire body was in extreme pain. If this was an ordinary person, his body would have long been unable to withstand the pressure. It cracked open. And Peter Parker, as his body had been powered up, so he forcefully endured it. But he still spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was also extremely pale. As for the monster, it was sprayed with fresh blood. Instead, it became even more excited. The light in its eyes was even more intense. At this moment, he had completely lost his humanity. All that was left was the instinct of a wild beast. Roar! The next second, it opened its bloody mouth. It prepared to bite Parker's neck. This scene, it immediately made Parker feel despair. He was pressed under the monster. He could not move at all. Was he going to die here today? He closed his eyes and smiled bitterly in his heart. However, right at this moment, behind him, a car was speeding over. Bang! In an instant, the cheetah was sent flying more than 10 meters away. Needless to say, it was this uncle. After seeing Parker being beaten down by someone, this uncle can't care too much. He quickly drove the car and wanted to help his nephew. Who knew? The car drove over and knocked the cheetah out. Quick, Parker! I'll block it for you. At this moment, this uncle had yet to realize how terrifying the monster was. He stuck his head out of the window. Parker, who was waving his hands, said, "Uncle Ben, you should leave quickly." However, at this time, Parker, who was on the ground, wanted to say this to him too. However, the pain all over his body made him lie on the ground, unable to stand up at all. And in the next second, after rolling a few times on the ground, he quickly got up. Then, it was like a black bolt of lightning. Suddenly, he rushed toward the uncle inside the car. What? When this uncle saw this, he couldn't help but be shocked. One had to know. That move of his just now could be said to be full horsepower. After all, this guy wanted to hurt his nephew. If a normal person were to be hit like this, even if he did not die on the spot, he would definitely be severely injured. But that monster, he only rolled a few times in the air. As if nothing had happened, he continued to pounce on him. This uncle was not stupid. He quickly retracted his head and hand. However, he rolled up the window. He casually stepped on the accelerator again. It fell toward the ground. He wanted to avoid the monster's attack and then hit him again. Who knew? That cheetah, however, was extremely fast. Its forelimbs landed on the ground. Its claws and hind legs swung together. Like a bolt of black lightning, it immediately jumped onto the roof of the old man's car. Then, it stretched out its sharp claws. It pulled away the fragile iron sheet of the old man's car. Then it pulled the uncle out of the car. This uncle hurriedly struggled. However, he was no match for the monster. The cheetah was no longer able to resist the surging appetite in its heart. Its sharp teeth extended once more. He aimed at this uncle's neck and bit at it. This uncle raised his hand. His eyes were filled with fear. And just as the cheetah was about to enter the old man's car, Peter Parker, lying on the ground, could no longer lie down. He forced himself to endure the pain in his body. His two palms hit the ground. With the help of the reverse force, he straightened up like a carp and stood up again. However, he gritted his teeth and ran toward the old man's car. However, at this time, this uncle had already been dragged out. No, no, no. Parker ran frantically towards him. However, with every step he took, that uncle's shout seemed to have weakened a bit. By the time Parker arrived at the location of the old man's car, he leaped into the air, borrowing the momentum of running. He kicked at the cheetah, who was standing on the roof of the car, at the same time. This move, in the future, it would be the move that Parker was most proficient in. However, this move required the borrowed power of the spider silk. And it lacked the help of the spider silk. As a result, the effect of this move was much smaller. But it was still the same. He sent the cheetah flying. After that, Parker turned sideways. He landed on top of the old man's car. At this moment, this uncle's artery had been bitten off by the leopard. Blood flowed out. Her breath was very heavy. Oh, God! This uncle! Is there anyone around? Can you help call an ambulance? Parker looked sad. He quickly raised his hand. He wanted to stop the blood from flowing out. Chapter 113, Losing Hope. However, it was of no use. Parker! Run! At this moment, Ben, who was still breathing, struggled to say. Fresh blood kept coming out from his mouth. Even before he died, this uncle was still concerned about Parker. He even raised his hand and gently pushed Parker. He wanted him to escape from this place. Then, his arm hung down weakly. Then, he stopped breathing. No. No. This uncle. Oh my God. Tears streamed out of Parker's eyes. He looked at his uncle, who was lying on the car's roof. Anger spread in his heart. All this. This was all his fault. If he did not come to this place. Thus, they could not encounter that monster. This uncle will also not die. Arg. He raised his head and shouted towards the sky. Then, with a heart full of anger, he turned his gaze to the cheetah. Parker raised his hand. First, gently put Uncle Ben down. Then, he stood up and jumped in front of the monster. Come on! You bastard! Come on! He roared. Then, he clenched his fists and placed them in front of him. The cheetah on the ground grinned. His forelimbs lay on the ground. His hind legs suddenly exerted force. Then, like a storm, he pounced toward Parker. His sharp claws flashed with a cold light in the air. Then, he waved it fiercely. It was as if the air was about to be torn apart. Peter Parker raised his fist. Then, he faced it head-on. This was all of his strength. One had to know. After obtaining the genetic modification, Parker's body was strengthened multiple times. Although if compared to the Hulk, Captain America, and the other superheroes, he was still a little weaker. But it was definitely not bad. This punch. If it hit, it would definitely deal a certain amount of damage to the cheetah. However, this powerful punch missed. That cheetah made a turn in the air. It dodged to the side. This caused Parker's punch to hit empty air. It was unspeakably uncomfortable. Next. The scene was even uglier. The cheetah was playing with Parker. He relied on his extremely fast movement speed to constantly shuttle around Parker. From time to time, he would leave a few scratches on his body. Damn it! Parker panted heavily as he panted. He roared. He was helpless against this guy. The enemy was right in front of him. But he couldn't do anything at all. This kind of powerlessness made him hate himself even more. Why couldn't he be stronger? If that was the case, then this uncle might not leave. On the other side, the cheetah was clinging to a wall. It looked down at Parker. It licked its tongue. It seemed to have had enough fun. Thus, he pounced at him again. This time, Parker was powerless and threw another punch. He was directly thrown to the ground by the cheetah. Roar! The cheetah let out a wild roar. It seemed to be announcing its victory. One of his claws pressed down on Parker's head. He sized him up. He seemed to be thinking. Which part should he bite from? This little bug. He still had some strength. In comparison, it should be even more delicious than that old fellow. As he thought, saliva flowed out of his mouth. However, it was better to kill him. Save the trouble. Thinking of this, the cheetah raised its arm. He was prepared to crush Spider-Man's head. And Parker. At this time, he closed his eyes in despair. After all, this time, there was no uncle here to save the situation. However, just as the cheetah was about to step down, Sue! 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 Several bullets shot over from afar. Bang! 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 When it hit the body of the cheetah, it actually exploded. It knocked him back a few steps. Grrrr! The cheetah was surprised. One had to know. Normal bullets wouldn't have any effect on the tough skin of this menace. Before, when he was on the street, He had once encountered a few hooligans. These guys had once shot him with guns. However, they could not penetrate his defense at all. Instead, he was killed by him. But now, this bullet was able to make him take a few steps back. The cheetah, confused, raised his head and looked into the distance. It wanted to see who it was that dared to attack it. In the distance, a police car with a sign of Ames drifted over. It was AIMS's team of guards. Chapter 114, Fighting Jackal. The car stopped 20 meters away from the cheetah. Then, a few police Humajir jumped out of the car. They were fully armed. They held a special gun in their hand. This kind of gun was specially designed for the research and development of the Amazon world. It had a certain degree of lethality. Not only that, there were also a few cars that had arrived at the same time. There was also one that looked like a reporter car. It seemed to be recording something. It was very obvious. The scene just now was recorded down. Those police officers Humajir quickly stepped forward. Then, from that car, another person got off. He was dressed in a work suit. He was tall and had long hair that draped over his shoulders. He was the current captain of AIMS Uayaiba. Ah ha ha ha. I didn't expect this. There are so many people coming. Looks like I can have an extra meal today. The cheetah declared proudly, tilting his head. In his eyes, these guys in front of him were all food. He almost couldn't bear his hunger anymore. You guys, be careful. This monster. Too strong. Parker, who was on the ground, was almost fainted. But he forced himself to hold on and reminded the members of Humajir in front of him. All right, now, leave it to us. Uayaiba raised his hand and glanced at Peter Parker on the ground. Then, she said indifferently. Then, she raised his head. Looking ahead, the cheetah with its teeth bared. Then next, you will be the one to experiment with the latest product our company has developed. As she spoke, she took a grey piece of driver from her subordinates. This was the second-generation driver that ARC had tried to create. Raid Riser. Compared to before, the AIMS Shot Riser created by Satellite Zia, this was much more powerful. The performance of the Raid Riser was a little higher. It was completely born for killing. It was more efficient and terrifying than AIMS Shot Riser. In fact, a day ago, the President's secretary, Izu, gave her the new Raid Riser and Projurisekis. She had initially wanted to ask about its effect. However, when she met her, the President's secretary, Izu, seemed to be in a bad mood. Therefore, she did not dare to ask more. The specific effect, she could only know if she used it for battle. As she spoke, she then brought the Raid Riser to her waist. With a whoosh, a silver belt instantly appeared and fixed place. Then, Uayaiba took out a golden Projurisekis from her chest pocket. These Projurisekis were also made by ARC. It was in existence belonging to the mass-produced series. Uayaiba waved her hand. The golden Projurisekis immediately started to spin in her hand. Under the illumination of the moonlight, she could vaguely see that on Projurisekis, there was the shadow of a canine. This canine, it was a mythical beast from Egypt. It possessed great power. Using it as Projurisekis was obviously not simple. After turning for a while, the monster saw Uayaiba. Then, Ua pressed the button on Projurisekis. Then, she inserted it into the Raid Riser at hair waist. Hunt. Henshin. Uayaiba said softly. Then, the sound effects of the belt rang out one after another. Raid Rise. Fighting Jackal. Deciding Thefado for battle like a Valkyrie. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound effect. A blood-red light appeared around Uayaiba. Immediately after, golden long tubes spread out around her body. It was as if she was one of Kamen Rider build. Then, a golden halo rose up from the ground, deciding the fate of a battle like a Valkyrie. Along with the collision of light and metal, a godlike ancient Egyptian god Anubis-powered rider appeared on stage. She was dressed in black and gold. Her head was like a wolf, and her body was slender and domineering. This was Yua's new form. Fighting Jackal. An assassin. She raised her hand. Along with the dark purple fog, it flashed past. A dark golden sickle was held in her hand. A short few seconds, This kind of change happened. The cheetah and Peter Parker could not help but be stunned. Roar! The cheetah roared. Obviously, he did not expect the other side to be a transformed fighter. And it seemed. Just like him, after transforming, she also became much stronger. Could it be? This guy also came out from that laboratory? However, even so, it was not afraid at all. At this moment, it only wanted to know. Was this girl's flesh more delicious? Chapter 115, Battle of Speed. The cheetah Amazon tilted his head and lay on the ground. He sized up this Kamen Rider in front of him and thought greedily. Saliva flowed out of its mouth again. Ever since it transformed into Amazon's form, it had been completely controlled by its appetite. And Peter Parker, who was lying on the ground. He was also extremely surprised. He looked at Kamen Rider in front of him, who was made up of transforming Yaiba. His eyes were full of shock. It looked like this Hiden company seemed to have mastered the same technology as Tony's Iron Man. Just one belt. It could produce armor that covered his entire body. However, could this female rider in front of him defeat this monster in front of him? There was still some doubt in his heart. Those who are unrelated, leave this place first. Humijir, who was beside him, raised his gun and shouted. It was obvious. It was to remind Peter Parker in the field. When Peter Parker heard this, he immediately struggled to stand up. He quickly walked to the side. As for the cheetah Amazon, he naturally could not wait to have food to eat. He immediately prepared to go forward. However, what greeted it was another wave of concentrated bullets. Bang! 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 It caused the cheetah Amazon to take a few steps back. As for Parker, he took advantage of this time. He found a hidden spot and sat down. The current him, due to the wounds on his body. His consciousness was already somewhat blurry. But, to see the result of this battle, he still gritted his teeth and held on. Just to see the result of this battle. And just after Peter Parker withdrew, Yaiba raised her hand and stopped his subordinate, Humijir, from shooting again. After all, there were two main objectives for this operation. One was to protect Peter Parker. Secondly, it was to test the effects of this raid riser. Then, he would collect the data. Then, next, let's start hunting. As he spoke, Yaiba raised the scythe in her hand. On the other side, the cheetah Amazon was not to be outdone. He immediately used his forelimbs and pounced toward Yaiba. Not long after, he rushed forward. The two of them rushed to the center and fought. Bang! Once they made contact, both of them waved the sharp blade in their hands at the same time. However, the difference was, what Yaiba was using was the scythe in his hand. As for the cheetah Amazon, he was using a pair of sharp claws. Swoosh! Swoosh! In just a moment, the claws and scythe had already begun to spark as they collided. They collided more than 10 times. Sparks flew in all directions in the air. Roar! The claws of the cheetah Amazon were riddled with wounds. But that Yaiba's scythe, it was still abnormally sharp. There was no damage. Roar! Seeing this, the cheetah Amazon immediately changed his strategy. He no longer attacked recklessly. Instead, he was like how he dealt with Parker previously. He constantly jumped around. He hoped to find the flaws of this girl in front of him and kill him in one blow. However, this time, he had miscalculated. As Humijir, this Yaiba possessed extremely strong calculation abilities. The cheetah, Amazon, danced around in the surroundings. It was instantly calculated by her. No matter where it attacked from, she was always able to make a judgment a second earlier. Then, she waved the sickle in her hand to block. So powerful! Peter Parker, who was far away, saw this scene. He couldn't help but widen his eyes. He only felt that Yaiba was surrounded by him. It was as if there was a layer of invisible protective film. No matter how the cheetah Amazon attacked, he would not be able to do anything. None of them could break through her defense. Instead, it was deflected away. The initial defense data has been collected. The data has been sent back to Satellite Arc. And at this time, a prompt sounded in the sea of Yaiba's mind. So it was just now. The reason why she had fought with this cheetah Amazon for so many rounds. It was completely in the process of collecting data. And now, the defense data has been collected. Then next, it was time to attack. Thinking of this, Yueyaiba no longer hesitated. She raised the scythe in her hand. She smashed it into the ground. In an instant, there was a loud bang. A dark purple fog. It instantly spread out. The cheetah Amazon was sent flying in a moment of carelessness. He rolled several times on the ground. As for Yua, she stomped heavily on the ground. She also followed closely behind. One had to know. This fight had been recorded in the data of Kamen Rider's Valkyrie. This allowed her to possess a speed that was even faster than that of a Valkyrie. Cheetah Amazon only felt a blur in front of his eyes. A purple sickle shadow slashed toward him. The cheetah was just sent flying. Now he saw such an attack again. His eyes immediately narrowed into a line. His could not dodge. It hurriedly raised its claws. It wanted to block the scythe. Chapter 116, A Silent Wish. It did not look like he had a mortal world at all. Who is it? Who's playing tricks there? Parker heard the voice and immediately put on a defensive posture. And at this time, a gorgeous figure walked out from behind the statue. She was dressed in red. It was like she was wearing a wedding dress. She looked extremely beautiful. On both sides, two people walked over at the same time. One was dressed in a green gentleman's suit. He looked gentle and polite. As for the other person, he had a mushroom head. He wore a purple dress in Mexico's style. It looked a little funny. Who are you? What is this place? Why are you doing this? Why am I here? Seeing three people, Peter Parker quickly asked. Good question. The green gentleman on the right snapped his fingers. In that case, then I will tell you one by one. This is the Devil Dimension. In fact, there was indeed a saying in Marvel Universe. This dimension was different from a parallel world. Instead, it was located in a unique space. Among them, there were several famous existences. For example, the Hell Dimension, the Dark Dimension, and so on. For example, the Hell Dimension. Its lord was Mephisto. He had been in Ghost Rider and Spider-Man before. It was a medium-sized boss. And the Dark Dimension was a place for an existence like Dormammu. Demon Dimension. Peter Parker heard this word. He knew that this was not a good place. The man in the green suit did not explain too much. Instead, he continued to speak. As for us, we serve the existence of demons. Name is the Dead Man. The man in the green suit opened his hands. Our mission. It is to find people with talent in the human world. Grant them a powerful ability, befit their talent. And you are. It's the existence we chose. The man in the green suit raised his hand and pointed at Peter Parker. His eyes were full of appreciation. What? Me? An existence chosen by a demon. When Peter Parker heard this, he was first stunned. Then, a look of disbelief appeared on his face. One had to know. He had always been a good student. It was only recently that his strength had increased. He only occasionally went out to fight a few underground rings. How could a demon choose him? As if seeing through the doubts in Parker's heart, another guy in a purple Mexico-style dress also jumped out. Because your aptitude far exceeds that of ordinary people. It is a special existence among millions of people. He immediately praised Peter Parker. Is that so? After hearing his praise, Parker could not help but scratch his head. But very quickly, he reacted. He hurriedly took a few steps back and then put on a posture. Hey, listen. No matter what you say, no matter how flowery your words are, I will not cooperate with you. To destroy this world. Peter Parker said righteously. As a kind-hearted existence. No matter what, he would not take the initiative to commit evil. Thinking about it, that was true. One had to know. This Spider-Man Peter Parker could be said to be the most lawful good existence among all the superheroes. When he was in school, he had always been teased by the school bully. He was bullied. If it was an ordinary person, he would probably have turned dark and fallen long ago in his position. But Peter Parker still held on to his original heart. Even after that, he obtained the ability. He did not have any use for it. Instead, he did everything he could to help others. He could be said to be a good person. After hearing Parker speak like this, standing in the middle, Aguilera, who had been silent all this time, suddenly laughed. She raised her slender fingers and wiped her red lips. Then she said, "Who said we were looking for you for evil? We don't want you to help us destroy the world." Aguilera said indifferently. "You have to know. This demon dimension is two different spaces from your human world. We don't have much interest in your world." Aguilera walked down from the platform and continued. "Do you remember? Just now, you called out to us for power first." Aguilera said with a smile. When Parker heard this, he was stunned on the spot. His head hurt again. Then, he recalled what happened earlier. That's right. Just before, when he fought with the cheetah Amazon, he silently prayed in his heart, wanting to obtain even more power. To kill that cheetah Amazon. Could it be that the devil dimension had heard the wish? That was why he had brought him here. Parker's heart was already a little shaken. On the other side, Aguilera caught a glimpse of the expression on Parker's face. She laughed in her heart. As expected, it was just as the president predicted. Chapter 117, The Demon Dimension. You should know. The two sides had fought so many times just now. But this time, there was a whoosh. His arm flew into the air. The black and red blood gushed out like a hurricane. This cheetah Amazon's entire claw. It was sent flying. That cheetah was so in pain that it rolled on the ground. The other claw hurriedly covered the wound. When Yue Yaiba saw this scene, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl into a sneer. The fight just now was just to collect data. Now, it was her true strength. Damn it! At this moment, the cheetah Amazon was no longer as arrogant as before. At this moment, it was like a wounded dog. In his mind, there was only one thought. That was to run. He turned around and said nothing. Then, he started to run with all his strength. The entire action was done in one go without any stagnation. In just a few moments, he had already run dozens of meters away. At this time, Yue Yaiba saw this scene. She sneered again. Want to run? Have you asked permission to the scythe in my hand? She raised her hand. Then she pushed the button on Raid Riser. Fighting Bullet. With the activation of the killing sound, the fighting jackal also suddenly accelerated. Her entire body turned into a black afterimage. In an instant, she caught up to the cheetah Amazon. At this moment, the speed that the cheetah was so proud of was actually crushed to the point that it couldn't even win. How is this possible? Amazon, who was frantically running, caught a glimpse of the black shadow behind him. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright. However, this Yue Yaiba did not give it any more chances. The sickle in her hand carried a terrifying dark purple mist. It suddenly slashed. With a slashing sound, that terrifying slash instantly split the cheetah Amazon from the middle. The cheetah, Amazon, immediately stopped moving. Its body froze on the spot. Its entire body exploded with a flash of purple-black lightning. The person released a terrifying roar. Then, it suddenly exploded. Boom! Black flesh and blood splattered everywhere. As for the fighting jackal, it was bathed in this rain of blood. She swung the scythe in his hand. Battle data collected. The entire scene was extremely cool. And when Parker saw this scene, surprise and joy, he could no longer hold on to his consciousness. He collapsed to the side. And at this time, Yue Yaiba removed her equipment. She called for her subordinates and quickly come to Peter Parker. Well done, Yaiba. Next, act according to the plan. At this moment, Levi's voice came from Yue Yaiba's earpiece. Yes, President. Yue Yaiba nodded. Then he ordered his men to deal with the scene. He moved Peter Parker up. Then, a potion was injected into his neck. And at this time, inside the luxurious manor, in the hall, a beautiful pianist was playing a beautiful piece of music. Levi sat on the sofa and poured himself a glass of red wine. He listened to the beautiful sound of the piano. He drank red wine. How pleasant! On the other hand, Izu was broadcasting the scene for him. Then, it's your turn now, Aguilera. Don't disappoint me, Levi said faintly. The next scene. But he didn't want to customize it for Peter Parker. He didn't know how much time had passed. Peter Parker woke up from his sleep. The previous battle had consumed a lot of his strength. In addition to his uncle's death, it made him mentally and physically exhausted. As soon as he woke up, he only felt pain all over his body. It was as if he had been tortured. He slowly opened his eyes. But the scene in front of him stunned him. What the hell is this place? Peter Parker said in shock. At the moment, he was in an extremely strange place. This place was like a cave. However, there was no exit in the surroundings. The ground and the surroundings seemed to have been shattered. All sorts of strange phenomena were constantly being displayed. It looked like it was as if he had arrived in a different space. And just as Peter Parker was slightly panicking, a voice suddenly rang out in front of him. Welcome to the Demon Dimension, Peter Parker. Hearing this voice, Parker immediately raised his head and looked ahead. The dim front immediately lit up. It was a gigantic, spiderweb-like structure. At the center of the spiderweb was a black statue. This statue seemed to have evil magic. Just by looking at it, it made people feel that it was abnormally evil. Chapter 118, Spider Demon Seal. We can grant you great power. We can even revive your uncle. Other than that, I can also give you any information you need. Don't you want to know who is the murderer who killed your father? How is it? Are you satisfied with this condition? Aguilera bent down and looked at Peter Parker below her. Like a demon, she said in a low voice. What? Hearing the series of promises, Peter Parker immediately froze on the spot. In his mind, the scene of his uncle lying in a pool of blood immediately surfaced. If it was at that time, he was a little stronger, perhaps such a thing would not happen. And it seemed the other party can even revive him. Not only that, they seemed to be very familiar with the death of his father. These three demons, every single one of them perfectly struck Parker's heart. It made him unable to open his mouth to refuse. Then, what is the price for this power? After struggling for a moment, Parker raised his head again, his eyes bloodshot. He naturally knew. In this world, there was no free lunch. If you want to obtain something, you have to pay a certain price. It's very simple. Sell your soul to us. Aguilera raised her hand and fiercely looked at him. I believe you have seen it too. The statue in front of us is our master, Lord Gif. He fell during a great battle. In order to resurrect him, 6 powerful souls are needed as sacrifices. And your soul meets this condition. Aguilera glanced at the statue. Then he continued to speak. Of course. It's just that you won't die. We won't interfere with you at all. Until you die. Only then will we obtain your soul. How is it? This condition is very generous, right? Aguilera explained. Peter Parker was silent for a while. Then, he slowly raised his head and gritted his teeth. All right. If your promise is really as you said, I agree. He replied immediately. For the price of his soul. If he could get his uncle back, then he would be willing. After he gained power, he would be able to protect everything he cherished. As for the souls sold, let's talk about it when the time comes. Very good. Hearing Parker's answer, the corners of Aguilera's lips curled into a beautiful smile. It seemed that the president had entrusted her with this task. She had already completed half of it. It seemed that Peter Parker really believed her words. Then next, let's add on his impression. As for why he did this, it was because Levi had discovered it. This Winter Soldier was giving him world point. It was endless. But in reality, the AI chip in his mind displayed. This Winter Soldier had not been transformed into Kamen Rider Ichigo. Then, why did he always give birth to world point for himself? Therefore, Levi could not help but guess. If there were some Marvel characters, their hearts would firmly believe in a certain rider setting. Then, he was able to obtain world point from this guy. This Winter Soldier believed in the legend of this Consortium X. So later on, even though he did not transform into a rider, he still provided world point for him. Although there weren't many of them. However, there was a steady flow of points that could be sustained. Of course, this conjecture had yet to be completely confirmed. That was why he had spent so much effort to set up this second scene. Let's see if his conjecture is correct. Was it correct? This was what Aguilera had described just now. And just as he was performing, Levi was also sitting on the sofa in the living room of the manor, staring at the live show in front of him. This so-called devil dimension. It was built using another base. The actor Humajir played the two deputies. Their heads were covered. It was impossible to tell that they were AI robots. At the same time, to make the scene more realistic, he also specially used satellite Zia to paint the space. It made it look like magic and reality were intertwined. Alright. Next, it's time for dinner. Let me see. What kind of existence is the demon in Parker's body? Levi sat on the sofa with his hands crossed. Like a director, he issued an order to the lead actor, Aguilera. Yes. Aguilera used his internal earphones. She heard Levi's order. Then, she raised her hand. She gently patted it. The purple-clothed man next to her. He immediately took out a small box from the side. What was placed inside was the demon driver that Levi had extracted from the system earlier. Aguilera immediately took out one from it. She saw the devil seal on it, as well as the other 4 demon seals. It was engraved with the phantom of a spider. It was the spider demon seal. Chapter 119, Venom. Since that's the case, use this demon seal. Sign a contract with us. As she spoke, this Aguilera turned over. She landed in front of Peter Parker. Then, she raised his hand and pressed the button on the demon seal. Then, she pressed on Parker. This devil seal could materialize the demons hidden in one's heart. Aguilera's actions. Firstly, it was to prove to Parker what they said was not false. He had really signed a contract with a demon. Second, Levi also wanted to see what the demon in Parker's heart looked like. One must know. This demon seal once pressed on a person. Then, he could summon the demon in his heart and transform it into a physical form. Of course, existences of different levels. The demons summoned in their hearts were also different. The low-level beings, the demons in their hearts, were just miscellaneous soldiers. And some poor and fierce people attacked the evil, with resentment in their hearts. Using them, they could create life disciples. As for the higher-grade demons, they would have their own demon form. For example, the demon of the protagonist Iki is Weiss. He was usually in a state of a blur. And once Iki used the demon seal, it will materialize. He was fighting alongside Iki. As for Iki's younger brother, he was slightly different. It was born out of jealousy of her brother. That demon looked exactly the same as him. Moreover, it could possess him, controlling his body, transforming into Kamen Rider to achieve his goal. And their younger sister, Sakura. She summoned a demon, but it was extremely cute. It seems to be the juvenile body of Lovekov demon. It made people call it cute. However, although its combat strength was average, it still could fight in battle. Transformed to become Sakura's weapon. And among all of this, the only exception was demon's driver owner, Kadota. Because it was the first level, the demon he summoned was directly blown up. So later on, when he transformed, it was immersed in his character, there was no demon around him. It inevitably made people feel somewhat regretful. And now, Levi wanted to see what could Parker summon out. Since Sakura could summon the Lovekov demon, then he would summon the spider demon. It wasn't impossible. And at this time, along with the devil seal, it covered Parker. A spider phantom immediately appeared. Then, red light surged. Parker felt a sharp pain all over his body. He unconsciously took a step back. And at this time, inside his body, a giant demon contract appeared. Then, rays of purple lightning accompanied it. The contract continuously clashed together. Then, it turned into a puff of smoke. And when the smoke dissipated, a pitch-black figure immediately jumped out from within. The appearance of this demon. It was actually similar to Venom. A muscular man. An exaggerated compound eye. And that mouth full of sharp teeth. It was like he had been possessed by Venom. Ah! I finally came out. This demon that resembled Venom opened his mouth and laughed wildly. Kid! You are really a weak chicken. Do you know? I have been in your body for a long time. After the poisonous spider demon was released, he immediately turned his head. He looked at Peter Parker behind him. He immediately lectured him. In the living room, Levi saw this scene. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. But thinking about it, it made sense. This demon was a manifestation of malice in a person's heart. This Peter Parker was bullied in school. Although nothing could be seen on his face. However, his heart was bound to be affected. However, he just doesn't know how strong this demon is. And just as Levi was making a private judgment, the poisonous spider in the field quickly gave the answer. It strode in front of Parker. At this time, Parker was still a little surprised. Hey! Is this demon born in my body? Looks like it. Looks like it is quite impressive. Parker raised his head and sized up the tall venomous spider. However, he quickly stroked his chin. He evaluated the appearance of the venom. But he looks quite ugly. This doesn't match me. Parker shook his head with a look of disdain. Chapter 120, A Small Compatibility Test. You are courting death. Venom, who was facing him, was unhappy when he heard it. He immediately raised his hand. He grabbed Parker. He wanted to beat him up and let him see how powerful she was. One must know. This demon was not a good-tempered existence. In the original drama, as soon as Daiji's demon was released, he immediately possessed Daiji and went to fight with his brother. As for Iki's demon, Weiss, he was even more outrageous. After being released, he turned around and wanted to eat his mother. Fortunately, he waved his hand and made a prompt decision. Only after using Revis Driver did he take back the demon Weiss. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. And the demon in Parker's body was not a good-tempered existence, either. Levi wanted to see what would happen to Parker. How would Parker deal with this situation? However, in the face of this demon spider's attack, Parker seemed to have been prepared long ago. He suddenly squatted down and immediately dodged. Then, he ran towards the rear. Still trying to dodge, the poisonous spider demon immediately took a step forward. He chased after it. The two of them began a fierce chase in the demon dimension. However, the two of them each had their own advantages. After chasing for half a day, no one could do anything about it. This poisonous spider demon was tall and large. Its strength seemed to exceed Parker's by far. Amount. However, in terms of speed and agility, it was far inferior. Parker moved through all sorts of twists and turns. Again and again, he escaped from the poisonous spider demon. In the end, both of them were so tired that they were gasping for breath. They stood where they were and no longer moved. And at this time, Parker was half squatting and his hands were propped on his legs. He raised his head and looked up at Aguilera. "Can you get this guy away?" he said, panting. "Kid, what did you say?" The poisonous spider demon behind him was also panting heavily. However, he still did not forget to growl. "Once this demon is released, it will be tough to get rid of," Aguilera said with a smile. "What?" Hearing this news, Parker immediately looked a little desperate. One must know. He was still in school. If he had such a big guy by his side, wouldn't that mean he wouldn't even be able to think of a way out? But I want to take it back into my body. It's still very simple," Aguilera added. With a wave of her hand, the purple-robed man beside her walked forward with the box in his hands. He showed it to Parker. "The thing here is something that can help you increase your strength." When Parker heard this, he immediately looked into the box. It was the previous item. It was the demon's belt that Levi had drawn. Why? This thing that increases strength is actually a belt. Parker scratched his head. He seemed a little confused. But soon, he confidently made up his mind. "It must be because I saw Hiden's belt before I fainted. I had a dream while thinking. That's why this devil dimension is able to materialize this tool that increases strength into the shape of a belt. How considerate." Parker clapped his hands and thanked him profusely. "This is Demon's Driver. You can also call it the Demon's Belt." Aguilera raised his head and introduced the item. "What a cool belt." Parker took out the belt from the box. His eyes were full of stars. Ever since he had seen the battle between the Jackal and the Cheetah Amazon, he was extremely envious of the belt of Hiden's company. He didn't expect that now. He actually had one as well. Although he had exchanged it for his own soul. However, forget it. Parker seemed to have gotten a new toy. He immediately fell in love. He held the belt in his hands and looked at it carefully. This belt. It needs to be used with the devil seal. Aguilera gently waved the devil seal in his hand. After she finished speaking, she threw it towards Parker. Parker raised his other hand and caught it. This belt is compatible with the devil seal. It will be a catalyst for you to combine with the devil in your body. Combined with the genes that are sleeping in your body. From then on, transform, and you will be Kamen Rider demons. Aguilera said as she walked back. Kamen Rider demons. That sounds pretty good. Parker looked at the two items in his hands, and his eyes could not help but shine. Right. To test them. To see whether you are suitable for a belt or not. We specially prepared a small test for you. As she spoke, Aguilera was already standing in front of the statue. What test? Parker held onto driver and the seal as he spoke in a daze. We have specially prepared 50 inferior grade demons for you. You need to transform to become Kamen Rider demons. Eliminate all of them. Aguilera said with a smile as she held onto the statue. If you can't do it, you lose your life. At that time, your body in the human dimension will die as well. Chapter 121, A Little Test for the Contract. If you die here, not only will you also die in the human dimension, but the contract I made before will also be void. Aguilera waved her hand, and her face was full of cute expressions. However, the condition shocked Parker. Then, I wish you good luck. Aguilera turned around and waved her little hand. Bye-bye. As she spoke, she raised her hand and placed it on the statue. The next second, light surged between her and her two subordinates. In less than a second, they disappeared from where they were. They arrived at the space behind them. Of course, this was the satellite Zia's work. It used the light to block them. Then, Aguilera came to the back of the field. Phew! It's finally over. She patted her body and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Well done. And then, for the next step, release those low-level demons. Levi's voice rang out. Yes, my lord. Aguilera nodded immediately. Then, she pressed a button beside her. And at this time, in the field, Parker and his spider demon were looking at each other in dismay. Around them, a vortex-shaped door opened. Then, dozens of skeleton-like demons walked out. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they rushed toward Parker and his demons. These low-level demons. These were the little monsters Aguilera had used the demon seal to create in the past few days. After they were created, these guys were locked up around this place. It was only now that they were released. Are these little monsters in hell? Parker could not help but take a few steps back. Then, he looked at the item in his hand. How do I use this thing? He looked a little flustered. On the other hand, Venom was a little excited. It immediately rushed forward. It waved its fist and punched at one of the demons. Boom! The demon was immediately blown away. Ha ha ha! How interesting! Again! As he spoke, it raised its fist and charged toward the group of low-level demons. Full of battle rage. But soon, he could no longer laugh. That was because there were so many demons. Moreover, they liked to swarm together. Although this venom spider was strong, it was difficult for two fists to fight against 1,000 armed demons. Soon, he was at a disadvantage. Some demons. They grabbed onto his limbs, and soon after, he was unable to move. As for the other demons, they also ran toward Parker. They scared Parker and ran around. Hey! You haven't told me how to use this thing. He dodged. He complained. But now, he could only rely on himself. Peter Parker closed his eyes. He carefully recalled the scene when Yuyaiba was transforming. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. Then, he grabbed Demon's driver and pinned it to his waist. Demon's driver. There was a buzzing sound. A red ripple spread out. The belt gave off a low notification sound. The lines that looked like red muscles immediately extended. It transformed into a belt and attached to Parker's waist. After that, Parker picked up the demon seal in his hand. Spider-Man. He pressed down on the belt below him. There was a buzzing sound. The display screen at the front of the belt immediately emitted a red light. And at the side, Venom, trapped by several low-level demons, flew into the air. No. He shouted loudly, and his body blurred again. Then, there was a swoosh. It entered Parker's body again. Deal. Then, a spider descended from the sky. Henshin. Parker picked up the seal, took a light breath, and stamped down again. On the ground, countless red lights lit up. As for the spider that appeared out of thin air, it circled around him crazily. Streaks of snow-white spider silk. It started to wrap around him crazily. Immediately after, a layer of armor began to cover his body. That spider also turned into a bracelet and covered his left arm. The sound of the notification also rang out crazily. Deep. Drop. Danger. Kamen Rider demons. Along with a burst of red light. A Kamen Rider, who was dressed in red and black armor and was filled with spider webs. Shining on the stage. Glaring and shining. And in the end, the few compound eyes on his head lit up one after another. He was extremely cool. And at this time, Levi looked at the live broadcast in front of him in the manner. Has he finally succeeded transforming? It really isn't easy. Izu, help me record Kamen Rider Demon's combat power. Then compare it with the rider of our company. I need to understand their power. Chapter 122, Power of the Spider Demon. I need to know, among our Kamen Rider, which rank is his strength positioned? Levi ordered. No problem. President. Izu immediately raised his hand and tapped a few codes. Above the demon dimension, dozens of hidden analytical instruments and cameras were immediately activated. They launched an all-round scan of Peter Parker in the field. The dozens of hidden cameras above immediately activated. It started to scan Peter Parker on the field. And on the field. After the transformation has finished, Parker opens his eyes. Is this strength enhancement that the demon mentioned? The current me. I feel full of strength. Parker lowered his head and looked at the armor on his body. He could not help but sigh. Since I have obtained power, I will definitely stop the tragedy from happening. Even if I have to bet my life. In front of Parker, it was as if he had returned to the scene of fighting the monster. That feeling of weakness. It was still fresh in his memory. Then next, I'll use you guys to verify my conjecture. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked at the many low-level demons in front of him. As he spoke, Parker charged towards the group of low-level demons. Ha! He waved his fist. He hit a low-level demon in front of him. Bang! Sparks flew everywhere. Parker, who was in pain from being fooled. The low-level demon immediately fell backward. It was like a bowling ball. He even crashed into a few low-level demons behind him. Oh! This is really amazing. Parker, who threw this punch, could not help but exclaim when he saw this scene. He did not expect it. It was such a casual punch. It was actually able to trigger such an effect. This was indeed the power of a demon. And just as Parker was still sighing, behind him, a few more demons attacked. Then, let's do it again. Parker turned around and kicked out. Boom! The demon immediately flew into the air. Then, it crashed into the wall and exploded. Oh, cool! Parker immediately cheered loudly. This feeling was simply too great. If not for the transformation, then he might have to tangle with these demons for a long time. But now, one punch turns them into nothing. This kind of power was something he had never felt before. It was simply too pleasurable. And with Parker's attack, the surrounding demons seemed to have sensed his power. They looked at each other. Thus, they dispersed. Then, they attacked Parker from all directions. As the saying goes, two fists can't fight against four men. No matter how strong this guy is. Could it be that he can still wipe them all out? Just now, that devil venom was trapped by this move. Thus, he was unable to move. If this Parker were to wait a few more seconds before transforming, that venom spider, it might be torn to pieces by those low-level demons. And seeing so many low-level demons coming from all directions, Parker was also a little flustered. But very quickly, a few things appeared in his mind. So that's how it is. After Parker thought and understood it, a smile appeared on his face. This demon's armor, other than increasing his strength, there were also some other offensive capabilities. After all, this set of armor was formed by fusing with the spider demon. Thinking of this, Parker no longer hesitated. He crouched down slightly. Then, he jumped up. His body immediately leaped into the air. And at this time, the surrounding demons had also arrived. They swarmed forward, waving their claws as they tried to grab Parker. If Parker fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, at this moment, 2 spider threads suddenly shot out from Parker's waist. It was like a 3D maneuver gear used by the characters of Attack on Titan. The 2 spider webs were stuck to the ceiling. It carried Parker's body and flew upwards. With a swoosh, Parker stepped on the ceiling with his feet. He hung upside down. He looked down at the ground below. Oh my god! This is too cool! Parker crossed his arms in front of him and looked around. Then, he looked down and found something unusual. As for the demons below, their eyes flashed with a red light. They looked at Parker who was above them, and in an instant, they set up a human ladder. They tried to grab Parker, who was in the air. You want to catch me? Watch my move. Parker suddenly raised his hands. He shot downwards. Shua, shua, shua. 2 snow-white spider threads shot out from his wrist. Chapter 123, Just Like a Dream. In an instant, the demons below were entangled together in the webs. They waved their claws. They wanted to remove the spider silk from their bodies. However, the more he fiddled with it, the tighter the spider silk became. Then next, try this move of mine again. As he spoke, Parker once again pressed down on his driver. Demons finish. The spider silk around his waist instantly shoots up. As for Parker, he also kicked his feet and flipped his body. Then, he kicked at the group of demons below him. Under his feet, a dark red spider web shadow was constantly spinning. Looking at the move, it was like the dark red electric drill used in Kamen Rider Phase. The light flashed from the spider web. On the other hand, Parker was like a sharp blade as he plunged straight into the group of demons. There was a loud boom. These low-level demons that were wrapped in the spider web instantly exploded. For a moment, flames splashed in all directions. The entire demon dimension was illuminated. At this moment, not a single one of the 50 low-level demons was left. They were all cleared out. And in this firelight, Kamen Rider demons gradually stood up, appearing exceptionally cool. Yes. Parker raised his hand and silently celebrated his victory. And at this time, in the devil dimension, Aguilera's voice sounded again. Well done. You have successfully passed our small trial. All the previous conditions, all will be established. At this moment, Parker raised his head. Now, can you tell me who the murderer who killed my father is? He asked. Obviously. His father's death had always been in his heart. Naturally. The one who caused your father's death was the person from Osborne Industries. Or rather, it could be said that it was Osborne Industries' leader, Norman Osborn. Aguilera immediately explained. And along with her narration, the two of them followed. A shadow began to appear on the main wall of the demon dimension. The figures there were numerous. However, Parker still recognized one of them. It was his father. And the other. It was Osborne's CEO, Norman Osborn. The two of them were in an office, in the direction of the Gene Spider. Richard Parker. An intense discussion broke out. Norman Osborn wanted to use it for the military field. Once it succeeded, the value of this Osborne Industries would greatly increase. It could even surpass Stark Group in one fell swoop. However, Richard Parker firmly disagreed with this point of view. His invention was used to benefit mankind. It was not used to kill. The two argued for a long time and did not persuade anyone. After that, they did not settle it happily. As for Richard Parker, he knew that Norman Osborn would not give up. Thus, he deleted a large amount of experimental data after he left. Then, he brought his experiment box and prepared to leave. Then, he brought his experimental data and prepared to leave. As for the vicious and merciless Norman Osborn, he would not give up immediately. Thus, he hired a mercenary group. Capture Richard Parker and then force him to speak. However, he did not get any useful information. Therefore, in a fit of anger, Norman Osborn ordered his men to kill Richard Parker. Then, he took the fruits of his experiments for himself. This was the origin of the grudge between the Parker family and the Osborn family. Parker was stunned when he saw this. If you want to verify the truth, You can go to New York's Rose Ridge Metro Station. There are some things left behind by your father there. Aguilera continued. All right. Now, you should return to your own world. I wish you good luck. Parker heard this and raised his hand, wanting to ask something else. But at this moment, white smoke suddenly surged out from the surroundings. It enveloped him. Parker only took a few breaths before falling to the ground, unconscious. A moment later. Only then did some of the surrounding humidor surround him. Bring him away from this place. After a long time, Parker opened his eyes again. However, at this time, he was no longer in the demon dimension. Instead, he was in the hospital. What? I'm here again. He sat up, looking a little confused. Parker, you finally wake up. You scared me to death. At this moment, the voice of the little fatty beside the bed suddenly rang out. Parker turned around and saw Ned sitting in front of his bed. He said with a pleasantly surprised face. At that time, you were in a car accident. Fortunately, AIMS's security team found out about this and sent you to the hospital. Ned looked at Parker and explained. By the way, where's Uncle Ben? Parker was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Then he quickly pulled Ned and asked. This uncle is currently lying in the ICU. But don't worry, your uncle is out of critical condition. Aunt May is watching him there. Your injuries are light, so Aunt May asked me to take care of you. Ned explained. Car accident? Is my uncle still alive? Parker sat on the spot and said in a daze. Could it be that everything that happened just now was just a dream? He shook his head. He was obviously suspicious. However, at this moment, a shadow suddenly emerged from his body. Of course it's not a dream. Otherwise, how did I get here? This shadow was none other than Venom Spider. Along with Parker's awakening, it also regained its form. However, at this moment, it no longer possessed a physical body. Instead, it was an existence akin to a soul. What? Chapter 124, Hiden Strike Back. You're here. Then the matter of the demon dimension is true. Did I really sign a contract with a demon? When Parker saw this Venom Spider, he felt lucky. Everything that he had experienced was real. This little fatty looks so delicious. I really want to have a bite. With that, the Venom Spider flew towards Ned. It wrapped itself around Ned's neck and said with its bloody mouth. Stop it! Parker couldn't help but shout. At this moment, Ned knew nothing about what Parker had experienced. He also could not see the existence of Venom. Therefore, Parker shouted at Ned. Venom was like preparing to eat a hamburger, but Ned's face was full of confusion. What? Parker saw this. He could not help but raise his hand and cover his face. Meanwhile, in the manor on the other side, Aguilera had returned. At this moment, she was still wearing that red dress. She looked extremely beautiful. Sir. Parker has been placed in the hospital. Driver has also been arranged. She bent down and reported to Levi. Well done. I finally fooled another one. Levi looked at his system and praised Aguilera. It looked like this Parker obviously believed in the matters of the devil dimension. In the system, the continuously rising number of world point was the best proof. Spider-Man Parker was indeed one of the top existences in the Marvel Universe. The world point that he brought to him. He was much stronger than Winter Soldier. Alright. Right now, I'm almost done with my work. Levi closed the system. Then, he stood up from the sofa. Now, it's time to launch a counterattack. This time, I want to take the entire Osborn into my pocket. Levi said with ambition. Thinking about it in the manner, he had cultivated many plans for many days. He was also a little tired. In that case, let's return to that Hiden Intelligence headquarters first. There, he still had some matters to take care of. Rila. This manor will be left to you to take care of. Levi walked forward, lifted Aguilera's chin, and instructed. And Aguilera's eyes were full of tenderness. Understood. My lord. Levi smiled. Then, he brought Izu back to Hiden Intelligence headquarters. Of course. He was not in a hurry to rush to the 6th floor. Instead, he first went to the president's office. He first checked the recent comments about Hiden. Although there was a little improvement compared to the beginning. But There were still countless images of him. The sales volume of the living type Humagear was still lukewarm. The only good news was the military order had already been issued. Hiden had already sold the Humagear in some places. They were preparing to set up a factory and produce some orders from the military. After all, the amount of Humagear that Hiden Intelligence headquarters could produce was limited. However, the local residents opposed this move. This caused the construction of the factory to come to a halt. After reading the news, a smile appeared on Levi's face. It seemed this Norman Osborn had spent quite a bit of money in this regard. But very soon, he would make him return the money with interest. Izu. 80 Uncle Ren hit the egg. Driver successfully developed it. President, what are your orders? The little secretary, Izu, had been waiting at the side for a long time. Now, how much reserves does this Osborn Industries have? What about their financial situation? Levi picked up a cup of coffee on the table and took a sip. Then he asked. Izu's eyes flashed, and he quickly gave the answer. Reporting to the president. According to the information I found, for Osborn Industries, there is a reserve fund amounted around 230 million. The financial situation has been displayed on your table. Izu quickly listed the numbers on the transparent tablet in front of Levi. It also showed the recent quarterly financial news released by Osborn and their real situation. Oh! See this news? The corners of Levi's mouth could not help but reveal a bloodthirsty smile. One had to know. This $230 million, if it was a medium-sized enterprise. That was undoubtedly a huge sum of money. However, such a sum of money was undoubtedly a drop in the bucket for a tycoon like Osborn Industries. It was so small. One must know. This Osborn Industries was one of the best biofinancial groups in the entire US. His subordinates had gathered countless high-tech talents. And to raise these people, they needed a massive sum of money every month. This $200 million was only enough to pay them a few months of salary. What's more, apart from the salary, this kind of company also had a lot of other side expenses. It looked like this Osborn's liquidity was already close to drying up. It was already at the end of the mountain. In the past few years, if not for the military's capital injection, perhaps, it wouldn't have lasted until this day. And the cause of this situation? It all came from the human body strengthening plan launched by Norman Osborn. Chapter 125, Osborn Falls. Just now, Levi glanced at the real-time data of Osborn Industries. Discovered the funds it invested into the human body strengthening plan. It occupied about 80 of the group's expenses. It far surpassed other projects. One had to know. This Osborn Industries had originally started with medicine. Previously, the sales of this medicine contributed to more than 70 points of their revenue. But then, Norman Osborn was unwilling to only be a medicine company. He invested a lot of money into the human body strengthening plan. The investment in biological medicine was reduced year by year. Moreover, he also planned a large number of excellent biological researchers. All of them were planned to strengthen the human body. There were a total of 18 project teams. This also led to Osborn Industries completely losing the ability to develop new drugs. Originally, it could still rely on the old book from before to eat for a while. However, he had never expected that this Hiden Intelligence had developed a better biological technology. This caused Osborn's profit to decline rapidly. Originally, Norman wanted to adjust his direction. But it was useless. The human body strengthening plan had already eaten a tremendous amount of money. There was no way to turn back. This Norman Osborn could only walk straight to the end. Previously, the situation was still better due to the military having the lowest funds. However, in recent years, the upper management changed people. The investment in the military was gradually decreasing. This made Norman Osborn have no choice but to think of a way. Thus, he misappropriated the company's other research and development funds. He created human body armor and a flying skateboard, hoping to cheat another wave of funds. Unfortunately, it did not succeed. As for the company's financial compensation released to the outside, on the other hand, Norman Osborn had a large amount of data beautifying. Only then did he maintain the current situation. He did not let the stock price drop drastically. But, no matter how good his lie was, under Izu's detection, there was nowhere to hide. Very quickly, A real financial report appeared in front of Levi. Very good. Now, I'll send out this report. Let this guy experience a wave of pain first. Levi took a sip of coffee and slowly said. This was his first move. What about their human experiments? Aizu could not help but ask. This is not urgent. Levi said with a smile as he sat in his office chair. As the saying goes. One must eat the rice one mouthful at a time. If he were to throw this Norman Osborn into the dust instantly. That would be so boring. He would let him see a glimmer of hope for victory. Then he would crush it with his own hands. This was the greatest revenge against the enemy. Yes, President. Aizu nodded vigorously. Then, he sent the actual data of the financial newspaper in his hand. It was sent to the mailbox of various financial news agencies and many investors. As for Levi, he sat in his office chair. He looked at the crystal chessboard placed on his table. He lifted one of the black crystal chess pieces and gently stepped forward. Very quickly. This accurate financial report had a specific effect on the outside. Many people from the financial world were shocked. They had not expected this. The seemingly glorious Osborn Industries had now reached this stage. The real report. This was unbearable. Many Wall Street investors saw this report and started cursing. Then, they started to sell the shares in their hands. After all, anyone could see the decline of this Osborn. Immediately. In less than a day. The total stock price of Osborn Industries suffered a heavy setback. It had fallen by more than 10%. The strength of the decline was comparable to that of the Stark industry of that time. However, this Stark industry had Tony Stark. He was still able to launch a series of products after falling behind in stock. And what was this Osborn worth? Thus, a new round of sales continued. Meanwhile, the investors and board members could no longer sit still. They wanted to open the virtual video call. They wanted to reprimand Norman Osborn. However, they discovered that no one was picking up the call. Thus, everyone threw down the work they were doing. They headed directly to Osborn Building, preparing to denounce them for their crimes. At this time, Norman Osborn did not know anything about this. He was in the underground laboratory. He was conducting the final experiment. In the last few days, his experimental team had already followed his requirements. One after another, they developed Amazon's belt and Amazon's armband. Among them, this Amazon belt was for the military. Its design was very strange. The two sides were similar to the handles of motorcycles. In the middle, there were two pairs of scarlet eyes. There were some activation drugs stored inside. Once the button was pressed, this activation potion could instantly be injected into the wearer's body. It would cause Amazon Cell's body to instantly become alive. This would allow him to enter an extremely strong state. Apart from that, they also designed an armband to restrict Amazon. Once you wear this armband, you will be able to use it. Amazon, who was already transformed, could be controlled. Listen to the command of the master. Once there was any resistance, the armband would give off an electric shock. It would cause a certain amount of damage to the wearer. This way, they could train even the wildest Amazon.